And on first down here against a really good Tampa defense, he's throwing it long. Gunning it long, Tyreek Hill holds it in at the 20, 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Kansas City, Tyreek Hill, an explosive first quarter, 75-yard touchdown reception.
Tyreek Hill doing Tyreek Hill things, long bomb, many of them there. Absolutely insane performance. Mitch Holthus, thank you for the call there to narrate just the absurdity, the video game outcome. Adam Kramer, Marcus Mosher here at the Game Day Podcast. You can listen to us Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Share it, comment, let us know what you're thinking. Really fun show. Always a really fun show. We're going to be joined by Jordan Schultz in a little bit to talk about those Kansas City Chiefs, to do a little like Tiger Woods-esque Chiefs versus the field. And Marcus, you were saying it last week before we dive into it, that get Patrick Mahomes for MVP while you can, right? That was, you were saying it. The value was still there. I'd say you were right, my friend. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, last week we were at minus 125 for Patrick Mahomes, and you knew with this big game against Tampa Bay coming up, if he performed well, that number was going to shoot way up. Patrick Mahomes did what Patrick Mahomes does, and now he's by far the favorite, and it's not all that surprising either.
No, we'll go into those numbers, and we're going to get into our numbers, our performance. Before we do, a reminder, if you like any of what we say here, and you like to shop around, go to thegameday.com. Look what prices you can grab on games. There's games happening like every day now. We're about to record this. There's football happening at all hours. It feels like a bowl season, Marcus, right?
It's great.
Like
it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's like it's a bowl season. So we've got to be prepared. Now, we were prepared last week. We're doing well here. There was some pre-show controversy over the picks. That's what happens when you get a last-minute Hail Mary, and you've got all sorts of point spread controversy, if you will. But 3-1 for myself, 3-1 for you, 14-6 on the year for me, 16-14 for you. So we're doing well. We're hot. What were your major takeaways from last week?
Apparently, it's important to have a quarterback in the NFL, right? We saw in Denver just how bad it can get if you don't have a quarterback. And I don't know about you, Adam, but when I was watching that game, I'm thinking of all my buddies and guys at the bar or at a restaurant. They're all saying that they could go in an NFL game and complete this pass. I could throw it to this guy. He's wide open. Apparently, it's pretty hard to play in the NFL. And I think this was a good reminder of just how incredibly difficult the NFL is, right? A guy that even played big college football at Wake Forest comes in and could only complete one pass on Sunday. I just thought that was interesting.
I felt really bad.
I
like,
did too.
I like football is so hard. That is such, and I think for once, because the internet hates everyone and everything, I think people collectively were like, hey man, that stinks. Like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I'm sorry that you're in that position and you're 1 of 9 and you're, could you imagine being thrown into that? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, I saw a report before the game that there was like multiple people in the organization and on the actual roster that never met this kid before and have never talked to him, and they didn't even know who he was, and he was starting on Sunday at quarterback. So just an impossible situation to be in for him.
One of the things I noticed, Marcus, was this was a very bad, first off, it was a bad week for Phillip Rivers, but I got off the train temporarily at the right time. We have to interject. We've got more Phillip Rivers to come, of course. But this was a very bad week for the public when you look at all of the games, right? Whether it's the Raiders versus Atlanta, whether it's Cleveland, Jacksonville, whether it's New England, Arizona. This was, I talked about it in Stock Up, Stock Down this week. This was a very public week. And with the exception of the Jets, who just are awful, and of course, anybody who bet Miami, congratulations. But with the exception of that, even with the Eagles and the controversy of that Hail Mary, of course, we have to interject some conversation to that. It was a very, very rough week, I would imagine, for the average gambler who saw some what looked like pretty obvious games, right? And they just did not convert.
Yeah, I think the Giants and Bengals game, I think it was like somewhere between 88 and 90% of the public bet the Giants to cover that spread, and that ended up being a 2-point game. So both odds makers and bookmakers, they made out like bandits this week. And we have these weeks from time to time when you're betting on a lot of bad quarterbacks to cover spreads, like you are in that Giants game, and like sometimes you are with the Raiders as well. These kind of things tend to happen.
Yeah. There'd be plenty of other weeks, but books have taken plenty of baths this too, but not this week. Okay, we mentioned the MVP with Patrick Mahomes. A quick check on the odds. Now minus 425 to win the MVP. Minus 125 last week when Marcus Mosher told you, do it, grab it. I hope you grabbed it. So at minus 425, you've got Aaron Rodgers at plus 575. I think I know where you stand, but what is getting in the way of Mahomes winning this thing other than injury? We don't want to see that, right? But realistically, what is standing in the way for this? Because it really does feel like what wasn't a runaway like 3-4 weeks ago now feels like it is.
Yeah. I think it would have to be some bad failures here and some big games that they have coming up. They play New Orleans. We'll see how they play in that one. But it really would be somebody else just going nuclear of the last 5 weeks of the season. And if there is one guy in the NFL that could do that, it is Aaron Rodgers. So right now at plus 575, the odds aren't terrible. And if you want to hedge your bet a little bit on Mahomes, not the worst way to do it. But it just seems inevitable that Mahomes is going to win this award. And just like Mahomes is inevitable on Sunday, right? Like 2 weeks ago against the Raiders, he got the ball late in the game, down 3. You just knew what was going to happen, right? I feel like against Tampa Bay, that game even got a little close at the end. Yeah. I don't think the Chiefs were sweating that at all. So just Mahomes is inevitable. It's just what he is.
How many over the next 10 years? I feel like this is just going to be like the conversation we have, right? Like he's going to be in the mix. Something's going to happen. Somebody may go nuts, but unless they do, he's just going to be right there.
Can I ask you a question, Adam?
Sure.
If I set for the next decade, if I set, let's say 4.5 MVPs for Patrick Mahomes, what would you say?
I'd say under, only because, and I was going to position this back to you, I think we're going to get like Mahomes fatigue. It's like LeBron fatigue, right?
Absolutely.
Like the greatness is going to become assumed. Same thing. I mean, that like I feel like that's just going to be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, we're going to look at the numbers every single year, and it's going to be Mahomes by a mile.
Yeah.
But I think there'll be other years where there's better storylines and there's a narrative going around, whether it's with Russell Wilson or a Joe Burrow eventually or Justin Herbert. There'll be other stories, but in terms of the best quarterback in the league and the best player, we all know who it is.
Coach of the year, stand in the positive, and then we got one negative award to decide, but a positive award. Coach of the year, Mike Tomlin, now even Flores plus 500. You got Vrabel in there plus 900. I mean, for me, Tomlin just feels like the guy. It's such a weird year that it feels like this is an award that could switch based off of any of the other variables that we're counting for. But anything jump out to you here?
No, I think Mike Tomlin is the correct choice here, right? He's never won this award before. His Steelers are going to finish number 1 or number 2 in the AFC, probably going to finish with at least 14 wins, if not more. I think this will be a little bit of a lifetime achievement award for Mike Tomlin. The voters love him. I think he's basically a lock right now, and at even odds, he's a pretty good value as well.
I think this is like your Mahomes advice from a week ago, and I agree with you. Get on there. This one, not so fun. Although I'm a Jets fan, so this is more intriguing than MVPs and Coach of the Years because we're not usually factoring in a lot of those. So, coaches on the hot seat. Who's going to lose their job first? Okay, this is fascinating. So, Adam Gase, minus 250. Marone, plus 200. Matt Nagy. I could tell you in Chicago, people are that is ramping up a bit. Plus 500. You've got Lynn at plus 1,200. Oh, my goodness gracious, by the way, the end of that San Diego-Buffalo game. I know they weren't going to win, but how bad was that? So bad. And then McCarthy at plus 1,600, which is interesting. If you realistically looking at this, it's a matter of who's going to pull the trigger first with the first two, right? Or really, I guess it would be the first three if they were going to pull it on Nagy, but that's not really the Bear style. So where do you go with this? Because at this point, aren't they just going to stick with Adam Gase, with the Jets till the end of the year, unless it becomes so toxic that it becomes a matter of, are you losing Trevor Lawrence, which we'll talk about here momentarily.
Yeah, I think Adam Gase is in on the tank, right? I mean, it's pretty clear that they've had chances to win games and he's thrown them away. So maybe the only way he gets fired is if they actually win games over the next couple of weeks, and they've got to get rid of him to prevent, falling in the draft order. But to be honest, I don't really love any of the value here. Like, I think Doug Marone's probably going to get fired at the end of the year. It seems like they're going to give him the rest of the season. Matt Nagy's probably the same way. I would be even shocked if he does get fired. I think they're going to give him one more year. I'll give you a guy that's not on that list that wouldn't surprise me. What about Zach Taylor in Cincinnati? We really don't have any evidence that he's a good coach. I mean, he really got that job because he knew Sean McVay with the Los Angeles Rams. maybe they fire him now and start to get on, some of these college guys that are, a little hot. Maybe they'll try to get on some of the offensive coordinators. I just don't think he's all that good. Maybe Cincinnati fires him sooner rather than later.
I think that's an interesting one. I also just want to talk about how atrocious, by the way, that San Diego sequence was, and the fact that Tyrod Taylor was going to start this year, if not for basically doctor malpractice. I mean, that's the one that jumps out because there's some obvious ones. The Jags just fired their GM. Ron's probably going to get the year. I'm kind of with you. Nothing jumps out terribly to me other than I still can't get over Justin Herbert trying to sneak it in while his offensive line is pass protecting. I've watched a lot of Adam Gase, man. I've got PTSD from that. That's still probably the worst football play I've seen all year. Really, really bad. So
just the Chargers. It's just the Chargers. It's exactly what you think of when you think of the Chargers.
Speaking of bad, we'll do some good, some bad with our next guest, Jordan Schultz. He's an insider for ESPN. We will ask him Kansas City versus the field, which I think is fascinating. And also on the not so good, Jets, Trevor Lawrence, trade. Marcus, you and I were talking about this on Twitter on the Sunday night, like sad fans that we are of franchises that are struggling. We will talk to him here coming up. Pleased now to be joined by Jordan Schultz of ESPN. He's the co-host of the Pull-Up Pod. He contributes to Daily Wager. Jordan, you do a lot, man. It looks like just off of it, you're all over the place there. Thanks for joining us. How's everything going?
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. Always down to talk shop, especially this time of year when playoffs are around the corner, man. And obviously we got a little extra time these days, so I'm happy to do it.
Well, good. Well, we will talk playoffs and then like the opposite of playoffs here as we get into sort of our discussion, and it's two-pronged. And we'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs. Jordan, Marcus and I have talked about them at length. I mean, if you're talking NFL, I guess you're going to talk about the Chiefs at length. But specifically in sort of the old Tiger Woods, Tiger versus the field, we're talking Kansas City versus the field. So the Chiefs right now plus 250. You've got the Saints at plus 600, the Steelers at plus 600, the Seahawks plus 850, the Packers plus 1,000. This is to win the Super Bowl. So if you're in the position now, and you're in the position because we're asking you, if you're taking Kansas City versus the field, what do you have?
I got the field. So this is a two-part question for me because on one hand, the Chiefs are 10-1, and it's going to take a lot to beat them in terms of like bad offense, a bad defensive game, maybe an injury or two. Like you're going to need to get lucky to beat them. But at the same time, I look at the NFC, right? And you talked about Green Bay and Seattle having relatively short odds. I like both of those teams a lot. And I just think as we get closer to the playoffs and we get into the postseason, the teams that are able to consistently throw the ball, Green Bay and Seattle, those are the teams that are going to give Kansas City the biggest issues. We could talk about Tennessee and the AFC or Baltimore, but I don't really necessarily trust like a Lamar or a Tannehill in the playoffs. And I don't know if I even trust Pittsburgh to beat them, despite the fact that they're undefeated. So I would look at Seattle and Green Bay and say, like the NFC as a whole with those two teams, I'll take the field and take the odds as well.
What about you, Marcus?
Yeah, I'm taking the field for a different reason. This is the first year of the new playoff structure, and as of right now, Kansas City would not get a bye week, right? And we've seen how valuable that bye week has been for teams over the last decade. So if they're having to play an extra game in the playoffs and Pittsburgh gets to sit and watch, it's just another game that could potentially trip them up. And I do think the AFC is fairly deep this year. I do think Kansas City has some problems on defense. They have some injuries. I love Patrick Mahomes and I love Andy Reid, but there's just too many teams, good teams that could be standing in their way.
Yeah, I would add. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to piggyback off of Marcus's point. Like the AFC is very deep, and we talk about the playoffs having 14 teams total, and not having a bye, and there's a lot there. And then going back to Rodgers and Wilson, if you think about the Super Bowl, right, with Jimmy and the Niners. If Garoppolo would have just been average in that game, above average, San Francisco wins that game and wins the Super Bowl. Now, the Niners' defense was very good, and they sustained a pretty good game plan against Mahomes. But the point I'm making is with Rodgers and Wilson, these veteran quarterbacks, and I mentioned Big Ben, even though I don't have as much faith in Pittsburgh to beat them, but these veteran quarterbacks that are very good to great to elite, those are the guys I would lean on, and that's why I like the field.
Well, and I can't, they're 10-1, but I can't say it's like a dominant 10-1, right? Like this is a team that's kind of hung around, has hung around with lesser competition. You go back to like the Panthers game, and like for the field, for me, it's like the bleep happens mantra, right? Like this is hard to do. It's really hard to do. It's hard to make it through unscathed. Yes, you've got Mahomes. I think it would be a very public answer would be, of course, Chiefs, Mahomes. I get it, Andy Reid. But I'm with you guys. I think it's really difficult to do. Time will tell, but I think there's another batch of really capable teams that can upend them, and be very interesting to see.
Yeah, we didn't, notice we haven't talked about the Bucs at all. It seems like that team is like the worst good team, or at least the least happy good team I've ever seen. If you didn't know and you just read the headlines, you think Bruce Arians is the worst coach ever, and he's not great. And that they're 3 games below 500, and it's surprising to me that we don't talk about them, and even the Saints for that matter. I like the NFC is the point I'm making, but I guess the question is, do we like Tampa at all?
I would say, like, if this was Jameis, if you just flip the names and it's Jameis at quarterback and not Tom Brady, we would be having the discussion: is Tampa Bay a sleeper team in the NFC this year that could go in late into the playoffs? But I think, because it's Tom Brady and it's Rob Gronkowski and Antonio Brown, I think the expectations were so high. And now that they're a good team, but they're not a great team, I think that's why we're so low on them.
But that's they brought them to the brink, even though the game got kind of lopsided early. They covered against them. And again, it kind of highlights the point that I don't think the Chiefs are Teflon. I think they're good. They're really good. And Mahomes, if you have Mahomes, there's just a certain level of, like, when you take the field, there is a part of you says like, oh man, I don't have Mahomes, and that doesn't feel great. But you do have a wealth of other guys that you feel pretty good about. So I think that's very interesting. And on the exact opposite question, Jordan, as we transition in terms of great current quarterbacks and great current teams, are my New York Jets. Sadly.
Oh, you're a Jet fan. Oh,
I am. I know. That's condolences. Tough. I appreciate it. Yes, it's tough right now. So Marcus and I got in this discussion on Twitter very briefly on Sunday about what do you do? And I it's hard to know what Trevor Lawrence is going to want to do, and if he's going to want to go to the Jets. So let's, before we get into the question of should the Jets trade this pick for Dak, let me just ask you plainly, like, what do you think if you're Trevor Lawrence and you see the Jets compared to some of the other teams? What is your mindset going into these last 4 or 5 games, and what do you look for?
I'm calling up Trey Lance and Justin Fields, and I'm saying, hey fellas, you can go one. I'm happy to give it up. That's what I'm saying. The Jets can't take Trevor Lawrence for the sake of us as football fans. As selfish football fans, I will not allow the New York Jets, Woody Johnson, and Joe Douglas to say, you know what, Trevor, come on down to the Meadowlands and be our next Sam Darnold.
Oh, no. This is so sad. I was expecting different for some reason, but I did not.
Trevor deserves better. He's the golden arm.
He does, but I deserve better. Okay. This should be about me. Marcus, I mean, what do you think? But here's the thing too, and I'll position this to you, Marcus. Like, are the Jags, that organization that we've seen make a run at this? Do you feel good about that? Or do you feel good about any of the other things when you saw, I mean, the reality is the Jets are a dumpster fire, but they do have a left tackle that's going to protect you for at least a long time. It looks like they've got a difference maker at D tackle. By the way, these are my only bullet points. They're very small. So, but you've got some draft equity, right? And it looks like you've got a pretty good wide receiver. That's about it. So, Marcus, do you have a very similar mindset here in terms of protecting Trevor Lawrence from the Jets?
Listen, I think Trevor Lawrence is a generational quarterback. So I do think wherever he goes, even in the worst of the worst organizations, he'll have some success. What's the play here for Trevor Lawrence, though? I mean, he's got to come out, right? There's no way that he can bypass another year of making money by going back into college football, because you know what? If he goes back, you know what's very likely to happen, Adam? The Jets are going to probably get the number 1 pick next year, right?
And he is coming out. They basically had his senior year.
Yeah.
So, and he's basically said this place has meant a lot to me. And I guess that's my point. The Jets are a horror show this year. And Adam Gase, I mean, it's just really awful. But isn't it normally pretty awful? maybe not to this level, but Jordan, isn't it normally this is kind of what it is and why you end up?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you think about this franchise, the only franchise to me worse in pro sports, at least in our core four North American sports, is just down the road at the Garden. The Jets and Knicks mirror one another in terms of bad drafts, bad management, bad front office, poor personnel, no player development. You could just go on. So I just don't trust that organization on any level. And, when you think about what they've done at quarterback, why don't we just look at Darnold? I was never a huge fan of his. Say what you want about him, though. They never gave him an opportunity to succeed. You mentioned Becton and Mims, but that's 3 years too late. They just never gave him a real chance to succeed. And, I hope for his sake he goes somewhere else and has some success, because I think he's still a very young quarterback. But the bottom line is they just don't have the framework in place that's necessary to have a good young quarterback develop and really become successful long term.
I would also add that for Trevor Lawrence, don't get too focused on the short term, because we've seen teams turn it around, right? Cleveland 2 years ago, what were they, 1-31 in their last 32 games?
That's true.
Back-to-back first-round picks, and now they're going to make the playoffs. And that was 2018 that Baker Mayfield got drafted. So things can change really fast in the NFL. As bad as it looks now, it could completely look different 2-3 years from now.
All right, well, let's go down the hypothetical, though, because, Marcus, I think you brought it up, like, what does he do? And look, we've seen guys that can kind of force their way out of situations, maybe not into specific situations, but out of situations. So we get down the road. The Jets are still awful. Trevor doesn't want to play in New York, although I think that would be awesome for him and me personally. So he wants a trade, right? So let's go weird down the rabbit hole. And Jordan, the one that comes up is Dak Prescott, right? So coming off an injury, if you're Dallas, you switch picks, you give Dak whatever, right? Is that something for either side? It's wildly intriguing because, it's just fascinating to think about these high-profile, high-level picks, this kind of an exchange. Is it something for either side that you think is a viable, really viable, or would be intriguing?
I think it's very viable for Dallas in the sense that, they waited and waited with Dak. They never paid him. He was obviously very productive. Now, we could argue whether or not Dak is really good. Is he good? I mean, we know he's a good quarterback, though. And if you're Dallas, if you could somehow maneuver, and I don't care if you have to mortgage 3 first-rounders to get Trevor Lawrence, that would be the ultimate move, because you think about the weapons they have. It's unbelievable. And, CeeDee Lamb and Gallup, and the fact that, Dalton Schultz has arrived, and the offensive line, and Elliott, who hopefully could bounce back. So Dallas, if there's any team for Trevor Lawrence to go to and have an opportunity to put up numbers, that would be the team. And if you're New York, I can't imagine how you wouldn't want to take Trevor Lawrence. I really can't. So I would say Dallas would love that.
I'll give you the Jets side of things and why I think listen, it's not going to happen, but this is why it's fun to talk about, right? I think we know that Dak, at the very worst, is a top 10, 12 quarterback, and I would make the case that he's much higher than that, especially what we've seen now over the last 2 years. He's a culture changer. I mean, he's a fantastic leader. We saw how the NFL absolutely loves him when he went down with that injury. Just one of the most well-respected guys in the entire league. So if you can bring in a guy, he's already productive, he's still young, he's athletic, he can play in different schemes, and to know that you have a top 10 quarterback that you don't have to develop, I think that's at least intriguing. And now that makes you viable in the AFC East. I think that at least gives you the best quarterback in the division. And I think that's at least something the Jets should consider if Trevor Lawrence says, hey, I'm out, I don't want to play here.
Josh Allen.
I mean what I said. It's Dak Prescott.
I am the biggest Josh Allen fan on earth. So I think he's spectacular, by the way. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't even mention Amari Cooper, by the way, if they were able to get Trevor Lawrence. Adam, you haven't discussed it. What do you think?
I'm sad. I'm just sad that this is the point. Trevor Lawrence I would love to see, for Trevor's sake, getting him in Dallas would be amazing. And that would be fun. I think that would be collectively great. The thing is that rookie quarterback first contract is the golden ticket to franchise success.
Yeah, you look at Russell Wilson in Seattle. That was the big
that is what you do especially when you've got draft picks, is you can build around and then spend. And this is, by the way, assuming that Trevor Lawrence is going to be good. I think that's the part that's most interesting. When you have a guy like this, and not like this, but you've got a quarterback like a Sam Darnold, and the Jets have let him down. So it's really hard to know how good Sam Darnold is. You're hoping that he's going to do well. I haven't watched as much of him, Trevor Lawrence, as like I have, including high school. There's like an assumption that he's going to be good. It's just a question of how good, right? Like, is he this kind of quarterback that we believe he'll be, or is he just going to be a top 10 to 15 quarterback? That's the part that's hard. But I do think from a rookie quarterback contract standpoint, that's so valuable. And that's the hard part with a guy like Dak, who's amazing, but coming off a pretty major injury and is going to now commandeer $30 million of your cap, like right out of the gate, if you do something like that. Marcus, your point of an established presence is, I don't know if I've ever had that as a Jets fan. Like Chad Pennington for a blip on the radar, as sad as this is to go back. So there is something comforting about that. And yet, because of the money, I just think that's where it becomes really difficult.
And also, it's more of you're banking on, the history of the draft. Look at the top 3 picks in the last decade of drafts. And how many of those quarterbacks would you take over Dak Prescott? The answer is 1 or 2 at the very most. So if you're already getting a proven thing, I know the cap is part of it and you'd have to factor that in, but the Jets are fine with the salary cap. If they can grab Dak, add some more picks to it, and all of a sudden we're a respectable franchise that can start to bring in some draft picks and we can start to develop our receivers and our offensive line. I think that's the fastest way to become a relevant franchise in the NFL. And listen, Adam, it's been a while since they've been that, and I think you know that as well.
I do. What's going to happen here, by the way, is the Jets are going to win a game. They're going to lose a tiebreaker, and then that's good, like true Jets fashion. They're going to miss out.
Exactly, yeah. That would be very fitting. I mean, yes. The one good step was getting rid of McCagnon.
Yes.
I thought I liked Joe Douglas. I don't like what he's done, although he did command a high price for Jamal Adams. So, maybe those picks turn into something special. But, fellas, I'm not if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'm thinking, despite the fact that it's New York, I mean, what a tough situation to walk into.
Yeah, I think the final thing I'd say is you just don't know what the next situation will be like, right? I mean, and you could probably force your way out of this, depending. And we heard a little bit of this with Joe Burrow, right? At the start of the draft process. Remember that? Even though he was an Ohio guy, there was like the question of will he play for the Bengals or won't he? And then that sort of calmed down. Sadly, I think this is going to persist. If the Jets lose out or assuming, whatever happens, this is going to carry into the year. And I understand it. If you're Trevor Lawrence, at least you have to be thinking about what's best for you. But he's coming. I don't think it's a matter of when, it's a matter of who at this point. So
we talked about AFC East quarterbacks. I'm actually just super curious, a little tangent here. Marcus, are you more bullish on Josh Allen or Tua?
I think Josh Allen at this point. I love Tua coming out of Alabama, but at this, we're getting to the point where the injuries are really starting to mount up. He's really never finished the season completely healthy. Josh Allen seems like he has gotten better as a passer every single year in the NFL. Seems crazy, but Josh Allen, pretty good. Might be the top, 5-6 quarterback in the AFC right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would agree. I mean, I wish I had a Josh Allen. If Trevor Lawrence turned out to be...
If Trevor Lawrence is Josh Allen, that would be fantastic.
It's true. It's a great point.
All right. Well, good. I'm glad we've beat me up here for a good amount of time, and we could have talked about the Chiefs longer, I realize. Jordan, we really appreciate you hanging out with us. Appreciate Jordan joining us to talk a little KC, talk a little Jets as well. Always fun to squeeze in the worst football team here into the NFL podcast. And now time for some picks. And Marcus, we are hot. I am extremely intrigued by our slate of games. I think there's just some fascinating lines. There's some short lines. I know we've debated some big ones here. So let's just dive right in. Bills -2.5 at the 49ers, over under 48. It's a Monday night game. Bills 8-3, 6-5 against the spread. 49ers 5-6, 5-6 against the spread. But that's an interesting team. And I'm just very curious here. This is kind of a clash of styles, and you've got Josh Allen going up against great defense. So what jumps out to you?
Why do I not trust the Buffalo Bills? Like we should. They've played really well this year. They have a couple tough losses, including one against Kansas City. But there's just something about the Bills I don't like. I don't know if it's their defense, which has been awful this season. Maybe it's Josh Allen. I don't know. But I kind of like the 49ers here. I'm taking the 49ers and the points. I'm actually looking at 49ers odds to squeak into the playoffs. I know it's been a really rough season. They're about plus 200 to make the playoffs right now. If they could get to 10-6, 9-7, give themselves a chance. They're going to have a game against the Cardinals later on this season. I kind of like the 49ers in this game. I think they're going to go on a little bit of a roll here.
I actually love them in this game.
Good.
I really like the 49ers. I actually like the under. I was looking just at some stats. 49ers have allowed the 5th fewest passing yards so far this year. They're a top 10 rush defense. Last week, they allowed a 61-yard run to Cam Akers, and outside of that, 27 rushes for 65 yards for the Rams. It's actually amazing. When you talk about coach of the year, like with all the injuries and everything else they've had, this is pretty phenomenal. As a Jets fan, I have like coach envy when I look at a game like this, that a team with these kind of losses still has this kind of a potential. So yeah, I like the 49ers. I'll take them with the points. I think the money line is really live, and I like the under here. And I think it also, you hit on something really interesting, and it's a trust game. Like Josh Allen has showed it, but this is a game, oddly, against a 5-6 team that I think is hugely important for him.
Absolutely. And I think the 49ers defense is going to give him a lot of problems. We saw Richard Sherman come back last week, immediately made a play. Their defensive line is really starting to heat up. Adam, can we convince you to put the money line parlay, or put this money line in our parlay? You like that?
I'm in.
All right, let's do it.
This is, and it's rare that you and I mean, we'll kind of bounce around in totals and stuff, but I think we are in perfect lockstep here. Our money line parlay, I think it got a little Thanksgiving goofy, maybe a little turkey drunk last week. I want a winner. I want a winner that we can celebrate together. It's kind of sad too, a 3-1 week each. You figured we'd be close, but that's the nature of the beast. Another fascinating game. Saints -3 at the Falcons, over under a very Taysom Hill-like 46. New Orleans 9-2, 6-5 against the spread. Atlanta 4-7, 5-6 against the spread. The Falcons have won 4 of 6. What's really interesting to me, by the way, Julio Jones sounds like he could be back in this game, which is pretty important because the man is a cyborg that gets footballs. What's really interesting, Marcus, though, it's like it feels like that game against this matchup was like somehow longer ago. It was like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And Taysom Hill threw for 233 yards, threw some horrific passes, threw some not so bad passes. So before I ask who you like, what does that factor in? Because when you saw that game, which was kind of a beatdown, even though Taysom Hill was kind of just doing his thing, to see the line like this is fascinating because, again, it was only 2 weeks ago.
I think it's because Atlanta is playing better, right? They just demolished the Raiders last week. Their defense has really started to play better. I think Raheem Morris has been a little bit of an upgrade at coach for the Atlanta Falcons. So I think that's why this line is a little funky here. I still like the Saints. I think they've got the best roster in the NFL. Now, that doesn't mean I think they've got the best team, because I think whenever you have Patrick Mahomes, you're the best team in the NFL. But it's just the best roster, 1 from 53. They're solid on defense, really playing well on that side of the ball. I think New Orleans should find a pretty easy way to win this one.
I am really interested in how Taysom Hill plays. I'm also not interested in the way he's absolutely destroyed Alvin Kamara on my fantasy teams. That part has not been good. But it's probably unfair to criticize him after last week's gameplay. Like, he did exactly what they wanted him to do,
right?
Which was basically sit on a football as the opposing team plays a practice squad wide receiver at quarterback.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? It's probably unfair, and yet I think it's completely fair to be skeptical. I like Atlanta here. I think Atlanta's playing well. I just don't think that I think over the course of weeks too, Marcus, by the way, this is sort of the classic game film cliche. But I do think realistically that you've seen this guy in small doses. You're going to figure out behaviors and trends from him that you've not been able to figure out before, the more they put on film. Didn't put on a ton of film on last week. At some point, Jameis is going to be in there, assuming Drew Brees is out for beyond this week, which it sounds like he's going to be. So really, really interesting game, though. Speaking of interesting, your daily dose of Phillip Rivers, round 2. Colts -3 at the Texans, over under 52.5. Indy 7-4, 6-5 against the spread. Houston 4-7 and 4-7 against the spread. I had the Lions on Thanksgiving. The Lions were in the giving mood. We gave away a couple of early turnovers to Deshaun Watson after scoring, and then Deshaun Watson did his thing. And then Marcus on the other side, I think it was me, and I can't remember, it was collective we, but I know it was me, really been talking up this Indy defense, and Derrick Henry just beat that thing down. That was not a brick wall. That was just Derrick Henry running through it. So what jumps out here?
So every week I do my 5 or 4 teams that are guaranteed to lose, and I picked the Indianapolis Colts to lose in this game. We recorded that early in the week, felt really good about it with the way Houston looked on Thanksgiving. And as soon as that video dropped, Will Fuller and Bradley Roby, 2 of their best players, they're out for the season with PED suspension. So that's never fun. But listen, it's still Deshaun Watson. My brain tells me the Colts are probably going to win this game easily. But I love Deshaun Watson. So I'm picking them here. I don't care about Will Fuller being out. It sucks, but hey, what are you going to do? I'm taking them +3 in this game.
I like the over. By the way, I'm laughing not at PED suspension. That may seem a little ominous or a little evil. I'm laughing because I'll write college football picks this year as well, which is it's like a landmine out there, right? You just got to try and the only change, the only constant is change at this point when it comes to football. And this is a significant one. I like the over. I mean, you lose a corner like that. I still think the Texans will score. I think Indy's going to play better. It's a little interesting to see, the odds makers have been given Indy a lot of respect. We feel like the last couple of weeks, and I don't get that sense here. Right. I'm not saying, the Texans are bad. I think the Texans are obviously better than the record would indicate. They've lost some close games, and O'Brien, what a mess. So I think you'll get points. I think you'll see a better performance by Indy. The one concern for this team moving forward, to me, Marcus, is that rushing attack. Never. And of course, it's going to be amplified last week when you're going in against that monster and you're rushing for 56 yards and 21 carries. That's a real problem for this team, and I think it could be a problem here.
The only thing is Houston really can't run the ball very well, right? They have Duke Johnson, who's a nice player, one of my favorite players in the NFL coming out of Miami. He's more of a guy that does his work out of the backfield. They don't have that monster that they can just hand the ball off to 25 times a game and get 175 yards. Houston just doesn't have that. I don't think it should be a big issue for Indianapolis this week.
I'm knocked back on the Phillip Rivers train. Yeah, I'm a little shook. Got off, knew when to call it a month, but maybe next week. All right, next game: Browns at Titans. Titans -6, over under 54. 8-3 for Cleveland. 4-7 against the spread, 8-3 for the Titans, 5-6 against the spread. And that's actually a perfect talking off point. This is just an odd game between 8-win teams. This is just an odd, and I'm not saying neither team is, that's the record. But when I evaluate these two teams, even after the Titans win last week, doesn't it just have a strange aura about it?
It does. And I think it's just because the Browns are weird, right? They're 8-3.
Yeah.
They're playing well, but they still have a negative point differential this year. It's absolutely crazy. And I think I don't trust Baker Mayfield. You shouldn't trust Baker Mayfield. You see some of the throws that he's making every week and you just shake your head. Listen, I don't like Cleveland a lot here. They've failed to cover the spread in 10 of their last 11 road games. If they get behind in this game at all, will they be able to come back in the passing game? I don't know. We'll see about their defense. Can they slow down Derrick Henry? This is the time of the year where Derrick Henry starts to become unstoppable. Yeah. I think I like the Titans to cover this 6-point spread here.
Those throws by Mayfield, a couple of open receivers were it's like
Jeez.
me. That was really bad. I don't know if that's fixable. I don't know what you do with that. Cleveland's best win. You beat Indy. You beat the Bengals twice. You beat Washington, the Cowboys, Texans, Eagles, this is this feels like a fraud team.
I mean,
it just does. I hate the word fraud. I feel like a fraud for saying fraud, but it is. I like the Titans. This is the parlay game. This line is fascinating. An 8-win team getting 6 points. I just think you're right. The style of play, the brand of play that Titans are going to have here, I think it's going to be a real problem.
So do we want to do a Titans -6 or do we want to do a money line parlay with the 49ers and Titans?
So I like 49ers money line. I'd willing to lay the 6.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know about you.
Let's do it.
All right. We lay the 6. We've got the money line. We've got 2 games, and perhaps we'll have another. Rams -3 at Cardinals, over under 48.5. Rams 7-4, 6-5 against the spread. Arizona 6-5, 5-6 against the spread. Kyler Murray is mortal. Kyler Murray, Bill Belichick did his thing like he's done to Patrick Mahomes. He did it to Kyler Murray, and Cam Newton threw for less than 100 yards and 2 interceptions last week and still beat them. That's fascinating. I don't know how much you could take of that into this week, but I found the whole result in that entire game is like a box score masterpiece.
Yeah, I don't think the Cardinals are particularly very good. We look at some of their wins this season. It took a Hail Murray to beat Buffalo, in a game they should have lost.
Good job there.
Yeah, they were down by 10 points to Seattle with 2 minutes left in that game, and they pulled that game out of their rear. They're a 500 team, and they're fine. They're a fun story. I think the Rams are good. Sean McVay has won the last 5 games facing the Cardinals. Cliff Kingsbury has no answer on how to stop this defense, how to stop the Rams offense, excuse me. I think the Rams are going to win this one pretty easily on Sunday.
I'm going to go over for one of the reasons that you mentioned. I think both offenses really struggled in different reasons last week. I don't necessarily think that's a bad loss for the Rams, right?
No,
the Cardinals one is just, yeah. I mean, especially to see the Patriots offense the way it did. I think both offense get right. I could see the Rams putting up 30 points here. I think the Cardinals are still going to find a way to score. If I had to pick a side here, I'm with you on the Rams. It feels like a pretty good team that just ran into a tough situation last week. So we've got 2 for our parlay. Do we want to?
Let's do the money line. Let's do the Rams money line in there. How about that?
I'm in. I was just going to say I'm in on the Rams money line. So we've got our money line parlay is growing, and it's under control.
I like
at
it.
The moment. It's not out of control. All right, so we go into rapid fire, and it's fun to watch, by the way, our moneyline parlay come to life here as we work our way through the pod. All right, so we're going to go rapid fire.
Let's do it.
There's some bad games, okay? There's some good games. There's some bad games, and I'll start with one close to home. Detroit at Chicago. Chicago -3, over under a very couple of sad over-unders here to start, 44.5.
I don't know how you can trust the Bears, but I'm going to give them -3. I think their defense is really good still, despite what we saw last week. I've got the Bears. Who do you got in this one?
I've got the same thing.
I can't trust them.
Was going to be the exact same. This is the one that a wager you put in, and you just feel horrible about yourself, and you feel horrible for watching the game, and yet I'm going to do the same.
Don't watch that game. It's going to be absolutely terrible. How about the next one? Bengals at Dolphins. The Dolphins are 11-point favorites over Brandon Allen. Who do you have in this one?
I have, again, football grossness. Over under, real quick, position it back to you. Over under 10 points that the Bengals are going to score. I don't think so. I'm going to go under that. I like Miami. I think this game is going to go exactly how you think it is. It's going to be ugly. It's not going to be that great. Miami's not going to score a ton of points. Miami's going to win here by probably 2.5 touchdowns.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of ways that Cincinnati can score the football unless it's on defense, and I don't see that happening this week.
Okay, Jacksonville at Minnesota. Minnesota 9.5. I'm hoping for a Jags win for Jets purposes. What do you have here?
I think Minnesota should be able to run away with this one, like literally run away with this one. Dalvin Cook should have a monster game here. Jacksonville's just missing a ton of guys on defense. This should be like a 27-10 kind of victory for Minnesota.
That Minnesota game, by the way, last week was absolutely
crazy,
bonkers. Yes, I'm with you. Jacksonville's been playing tough. They've been pretty competitive, at least in times, first half and everything else. I think at some point that's going to break. You can't be trotting out the quarterbacks that they are right now. And I think Minnesota, like you said, Dalvin Cook's going to have himself a day. All
right, how about the next game? My Raiders that I cover, 7.5-point favorites against your New York Jets.
I don't know how you can back the Jets right now. I don't have much to say, and I'm very sad about this. Although this is a must-lose game for the Jets, Marcus. Like, this is one of the winnable games on their schedule. They must lose. Raiders will recover. I think they could be close, but again, the Jets are so bad, I can't do it.
Jets have played some good football over the last month, though. I mean, they're obviously still trying to tank.
Don't say that.
I don't know. I don't trust the Raiders at all. So this is a complete stay away for me. Just stay away from this game.
Quinnen Williams, by the way, remember that? Remember how bad he was, and now he's amazing.
Yep.
Oh man, that's the one bright spot. All right, New York Giants at Seattle. Seattle -10. I mentioned there's some bad games. There's some double-digit lines we've worked through. Here's another one. We got more coming up.
There's no way I can bet on Colt McCoy here, right? There's just no way. Give me Russell Wilson in -10 here.
I'm going to stay away just because Seattle finds a way to win or like by one possession like every week. And it's just an odd team and it's an odd dynamic. And I'm just going to avoid. I look at this line and everything else and I just say no thank you.
Speaking of bad quarterbacks, how about Carson Wentz and the Eagles? They are 9-point underdogs in Green Bay against the Packers on Sunday. Who do you got?
So this feels a lot like last week where we talked about Bears and Green Bay, and we're both just like, yeah, Green Bay. You know what I mean? Like I have the same vibe, and I'm looking for value. Wentz is broken. The team is not very good. The play calling is bad. The coaching is awful. I like Green Bay.
Yeah, there's really no way I can see Philadelphia scoring 17, 20 points in this game. Green Bay should absolutely run away with this one.
New England, this is a really interesting game in my opinion. New England -1 at the Chargers, over under 47.
It's probably going to be New England. I think Belichick is just so good against rookie quarterbacks. He's going to throw a bunch of things at Justin Herbert that he hasn't seen before. They're playing well, but so are the Patriots. So I'm taking New England here.
I like exactly what you're talking about. I'm going to go under. I think that the New England offense is not great. I think Herbert may struggle a little bit. It just feels like an under game of two teams that are probably going to collide, and it's just going to be a meh football game. But still, I'm really interested to see what you get out of Justin Herbert. Next game, the Denver Broncos are 14-point underdogs to the Kansas City Chiefs. Who do you have in this one? Are you playing quarterback for them in this game?
What would that line look like? It can't be any worse than what we saw last week.
No, couple of points. I'll take Kansas City again. I don't like doing that. It feels dirty just laying the 14, but this just feels like it's going to be rough. It's a team that's kind of been disjointed and just disarray the last couple of weeks for obvious reasons. Quarterbacks aside, I think this one could be really lopsided.
Yeah, that's a lot of points for a divisional game. Now, Denver is getting back their quarterbacks. I kind of like Denver to keep it within 2 touchdowns. I think there's some late backdoor cover potential here. Give me Denver.
All right, Washington at Pittsburgh -10. This is out of the last couple of games we've talked about. This is like the third out of fourth game that's double digits, and the other one was 9 points. So with that very sex appeal, football sexy intro, what do you have?
Yeah, this is just a terrible matchup for Washington. Alex Smith can't throw the ball. He can't really move. Pittsburgh is going to blitz him all game long. I don't think this one's going to be very close. I know it's a short week for the Steelers. I like the Steelers to win by double digits pretty easily. What about you?
Yeah, same thing. And this is super chalky week for me here. Yep. You just go through these games individually and then you hear everything come out. I just think it's going to be a chalky week. I think it's lopsided. I think Pittsburgh, despite all the madness around it, has played really, really well. So, yeah, totally with you there.
And our final game, Dallas Cowboys against the Baltimore Ravens. We have no idea who's going to be playing in quarterback for the Ravens. Could be maybe RG3 against Andy Dalton. We'll see. But it looks like the Ravens are somewhere between 7.5 point favorites. Who do you got in this one?
I have no idea. Again, I don't know how you can do this. The game is taking place as we are recording this, right? So it makes it even more difficult with everything going on. I have no idea how we would treat it. It's a stay away from me. What about you?
I like Baltimore. I think they're going to be able to find ways to run the ball against Dallas. They can't stop the run at all. Antonio Gibson had a huge game on Thanksgiving. Look for J.K. Dobbins, Mark Ingram to come back and have a lot of success this week.
There you have it. All right, so stay away. Not many stayaways this week, despite everything else. Our parlay, our crazy parlay, as it's written in the this is not crazy. It is calculated risk, right? It is informed chaos. We have the 49ers money line, Titans cover, Rams money line, Bears cover. Oh God, that's in there. Oh my goodness, Miami cover, Green Bay cover, and Pittsburgh cover. That's 25 to win 23-25. And when the Bears disrupt this thing and cost us, and the listeners will have to evaluate life and all these decisions moving forward. How do you feel about that parlay?
I'm looking at all the quarterbacks we just bet on, and it includes Mitch Trubisky, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Tannehill, and Nick Mullins. I just got a little bit scared. So, not great.
Yes. But you did talk about the quarterback play and how bad it was, and in true spirit of the pod, there you have it. So, really appreciate everybody joining. A reminder that you can check out and get involved in our weekly debates. We had a couple this week, which you guys can have your opinions on. What should the Jets do? The Jets should draft Trevor Lawrence, obviously. We've got videos coming up. Marcus, I'm doing stock up, stock down, stock to watch. What do you've got going on here for the game day?
As always, I got my 4 teams guaranteed to lose each week. I've got betting trends coming out. I've got mailbag questions that I answer every week. A lot of content at the game day, so make sure you guys are tuned in.
Yes, and if you guys like our picks, be sure to check, do your shopping at thegameday.com. See what our affiliates have to offer when it comes to, going to the window. Hopefully you can take this information. We've been doing all right of late and make some money for it. You can check us out. A reminder, share this podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. We're really enjoying it. We're having fun. We're just getting started. So we appreciate it. We appreciate Jordan Schultz for joining us, our guest. To handle our debates with us. And we look forward to talking to you guys next week.